Uh, Good morning, everyone. How you doing? Excuse me. I should probably mute my sound effects for Discord now that I think about it. Let's see. Hopefully you guys are doing okay on this Saturday. As we get the stream up and rolling. Where'd it go? There we go. Sorry, I should have handled this a little bit earlier and just running behind schedule just a little bit, but that's okay. All right. There we are. Okay. So the way this is basically going to work, it looks like most people have congregated within the general channel, and that's perfectly fine. It's probably going to be easier if you have questions that you want to ask in the stream. I would ask that you hop over to the questions channel in the tutoring category so that you can place your questions and the mods can see those. When the mods see those questions, especially if they see the same question appearing over time, then they're able to say, oh, okay, that's a question that needs to be addressed. And they will grab you and move you into they'll move you into the waiting to be moved voice channel. I will be going to the waiting to be moved voice channel to grab you and pull you into my channel, okay? Which means I got to figure out how that works, but I'm pretty sure I can white cane it and figure it out. Once again, big, huge thank you to Mr. Mercer. Huge thank you to Mr. Mercer for setting up this Discord server so that we have the ability to have this level of communication without, what's the word I'm looking for? Devolving to, to Twitch memery. So really, really glad that this was done for us. And thank you very much, Mr. Mercer, for setting that up. All right, so let's see. It looks like we've already got some people using the public channels to speak to each other, which is great. I think that's fantastic. Welcome to our tutors and admins, or the mods here, are Alex Quintanilla, Stephen Crawford, and William Mercer, who will be acting as our Discord moderator. So thank you very much, guys, for being here and for your service and time. So as you come in, you will congregate in the general channel, and that's perfectly fine. But when you have questions that you want to ask of the show, hop on over to the questions channel and start asking, and then we can pull you over from there, okay? So I'm hoping that Fraculator's going well for you guys. I know we've just been zeroing in on that for over a week now. And then yesterday we talked about while and do while loops. And if we need more clarification on loops, not a problem. I'll wait for questions for those to come in. Not a problem at all. And if you want, on Monday we're going to talk about for loops at the level that we talked about while loops yesterday. So I'm trying to think if there's there are some things I want to go over just briefly that I went over in the previous stream, but just thought I would throw this in there in case it's useful to you later. And I'll do little things like this in between, waiting for people to show up in the waiting to be moved channel. So let's see. Yay, I'm voice connected in there. Here's my admin room. Yay. Okay. Sorry, I'm kind of jumping around the Discord myself, just trying to monitor what's going on and see how things are going. So I'm going to go ahead and mute my microphone for right now, and I'll come back to that later. All right. Excuse me, sorry. So, I just woke up a little bit ago and showered. Does it show? Probably. What would be the next piece of interesting information that would be useful for you? Well, you know, one of the things that we ought to realize is that strings are complex objects and we can manipulate them in several ways, right? For example, if I have some sort of string here and I don't know, maybe, let's see, let's do greeting, right? Let's do greeting. And let's say, hello there, good friend. If I have something simple like this, it's not very hard for me to print this thing out. You've done it a gabillion times. And I can even add to it. I can say greeting, and I can use a compound operator, plus equals. Plus equals is a really cool compound operator, and I realize I haven't talked about this in class yet, and it's something that I use all the time. The compound operator plus equals says the exact same thing as take the original greeting, and I want you to assign to it the current value of greeting plus some other thing. So I might come in here and say, how are you today? Right? I might extend the greeting and make it a question. So once I've done that, if I print this thing out to the console, come on, try and do the autofill. There we go. If I try to print this thing out to the console, then when this thing executes, it's not just the first portion of greeting, it also has now been concatenated with how are you today, and now it's all one new string, right? And the faster way of doing that is instead of saying greeting equals itself plus this other thing, we can say plus equals, and it's the exact same expression. It's the exact same expression. So, sorry, I'm just sort of checking over here really quick to make sure there's nothing already waiting. Now when I run this thing, the output is going to be exactly the same thing, right? So, so the output is exactly as we expected. This compound operator is super useful. This compound operator, since I'm on that subject, also works with numbers. If I have something like int x equals 10 and I have int y equals 15 or whatever, let's make it 14. You know where this is going. And then later on, you know, after some logic, I decide...
Mute yourself. You're going to be in there.
I decide to increase x by y. Then I can say something like x plus equals y. If I decided that I wanted to increase x by 10, that could just be a hard-coded value. That's not a problem. If there's some method, like maybe I have some add nums method that, you know, I pass some values into and then it returns, or, you know, whatever, or get random num. I'll show you on Monday how to get random stuff. Get random num. If I have some method that gives me some random number and I want to increase x by that value, I can call that method. It will return an int, and then I can add that int to x, the current value of x, and then it will assign that new value to x. So, for example, if x is 10 and some random number, if the method returns 7, for example, then when I'm done, x will be 17 in this case, right? So the compound operator is super useful, and the compound operator for numerics works for all 5 math operations. Plus, minus, multiply, divide, mod. All 5 of those operators can be used in a compound operator situation so that when the math is done, it gets assigned to the original variable. So that's a very useful tool to have. Okay, so taking a quick peek, I still don't have anyone who is in the waiting to be moved channel, I think. Let me see. At least not of which I'm aware. Every once in a while, I get someone who comes over and says hi to me and waiting to be moved, and that's cute. But anyway. Let's see. Offline, online, do-do-do. Let's see. I am so sorry, folks. Basically, I'm trying to figure out what my role is in this whole Discord server thing in terms of like, do I move? How do I move people over? How do I know when people are ready to be moved over? That sort of thing. So give me a second while I kind of get my bearings. Yeah. Let's see. You've got a good point. So, yeah, let's see. I'm going to ask in the chat really quick, who's waiting to be moved? I'm in the general channel right now. Let's see. Yeah, who else, though? They're like, yeah, you are. Let me check my admin channel. Is there anyone in there? No. Yeah, I don't see anyone. I don't see anyone in the waiting to be moved channel, which tells me that that no one has a question yet to be asked. All right, cool. So I am curious, what's going to help you guys right now? I know that some of you are struggling with Fraculator, or maybe you're done with Fraculator, but you're ready for the next piece of information. So I want to focus on Fraculator vital information first, but then once we have the Fraculator satisfied, once you guys are okay with that, then I feel like we're free to move on to the next thing, right? And I'll probably start with just a couple of the topics I plan to teach you on Monday. But maybe we could do something just a little bit fun for right now, and then we can go from there, right? We can do something just a little playful with code, and that'll teach you something along the way as well. So, let's see. You know what's really useful? Check this out. So I know I started talking about string manipulation. I showed you how you could do this compound operator. Then I got into math and stuff. And it just got me thinking, this method right here, this get random number method, man, you'd be surprised how many times a random number would be helpful. You would be surprised. So you know what? Instead of talking about string manipulation right now, because we've kind of talked about that in times past, and there are some things I want to teach you about that. First, let's talk about random. Now, there are two ways to get random numbers in Java, okay? One way is to get, hang on one second. There are two ways to get random numbers in Java. Now, the first way, and I'm going to show you my preferred way, okay? So I'm going to put like a whole bunch of asterisks here. The first and preferable way is to use a random object. Now, what do I mean by random object? There's actually a class called random. Just like there's a class called buffered reader, there's this class called buffered reader, and we can make an object out of buffered reader by declaring a variable and then saying new buffered reader. What we're doing here is we're building an instance. We're building an object of buffered reader that we can use later on and grab its functions and do everything a buffered reader can do. Well, there's also a random object called it's called random. There's a random class called random, and we can make the RNG. Yes, I know what you're thinking in your head right now, but I'm not going to say that name. So we have RNG, and we can make a new random object. And in this case, the random object doesn't take any arguments like the buffered reader takes arguments, right? And of course, I get the red squiggle worm of death. How do I fix it? Control, Shift, O! And that's going to bring my import in, right? If I expand my imports, you'll see that random has been added. And if I want to get a random number, like I'll just say randnum, some int, right? I can say rng dot next next int. I can say next int. Now, you might remember that next int is a method that also belongs to scanner. This is not the same method that scanner has. Scanner has this method called next int, and really what it means is wait for the user to put something into the console, and then I'm going to parse that to an int. That's not what this method does. This method generates an int along the entire spectrum of ints. So here you can call next int in a couple of different ways. You can call next int just as you see here with no arguments, and it will return a random number across the entire spectrum of ints. All the negatives, all the positives, all 4.25 billion possibilities are going to be in this random number. And then just to kind of show how that works, let's go ahead. And by the way, I know that someone's waiting to ask a question. That's great. I'll get to you in just a second. Let me just finish this thought. So I've got random 2 and random 3. And then down here, I can go ahead and print those out as well, just so that you can see. And yeah, I normally would put this in a loop, but I'm not going to do that for right now. And this will be 2, and this will be 3. And now, when I execute this, you can see I called nextInt 3 times, and each time it gave me a different number. If I run this again, you'll see I get a different set of numbers. Coincidentally, the first one was negative twice, but now the first one's positive, the next 2 are negative. These are completely random, and we can use these to our advantage, not only for like test data, but also there are situations like when we're building games, for example, that we want random outcomes. And so having a random object is very helpful. I'll get to more on that in just a little bit. But first, let's go to our very first person to ask a question. I'm going to grab that person and drag him into my room. Hey, Duds, how is it going? Remember that you might be pushed to talk. I'm going to make sure that you're not muted here. It doesn't look like you're on mute to my knowledge. But anyway, you are pushed to talk.
He needs to turn push to talk on.
Oh, he's turned push to talk on.
Yes.
Okay, Tobin, do you know how to do that? Mercer, how would he do that if he's not sure?
He would go into settings down for where user settings is, and he would go to the app settings, video, and voice, and then switch from voice activity to push to talk, and then he would assign a key that he would like to use.
Okay, so for those of you who are watching this, that's going to be the protocol for everyone who comes onto this channel. So you got to have push to talk activated, and that way we can kind of control the noise level in the channel. And following Mr. Mercer's instructions, you want to go to your user settings and change from active talk to push to talk, and then set up a key binding for your push to talk. Hey, Tobin, how's it going, bud?
It's going pretty good.
Awesome. So what question do you have today?
So I have an issue where I can't convert my my fraction to a decimal.
All right, so you're having trouble converting the fraction to a decimal.
Yes.
So can you describe can you give me a concrete example? First of all, how are you storing your fraction? Is it as 3 separate ints?
Yeah.
All right, so you might have something like this where you have an int whole number, and can you give me an example whole number? What would an example whole number be? Tobin?
Oh, sorry.
That's
I'm
okay.
used to just regularly talking.
I know, I'm sorry about that. It's okay.
Don't worry.
So what's a whole number that you're using?
It'd be 2. Oh, well, I'll use 2 in this case.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. And then you might have a numerator. I'll just call it num for short. And what value for your numerator?
3.
3. Sounds great. And then finally the denominator. What do you have?
We'll say 6.
6. Sounds like fun. In fact, what's interesting about this is that we have 2.5, right? So that's kind of nice and useful because we know that this is going to come out to 2.5. So that's good. All right, cool. So then tell me about your process. What process are you using in an attempt to get a decimal?
So beforehand, I was like grabbing both like the numerator and the denominator. And from there, I would I tried to like multiply them together and then divide it, and in there I'd like multiply it by 10.
Well, now hang on a second. If you when we multiply by 10, it suggests that our decimal value is the decimal itself needs to be moved to the right. In other words, we need to increase it by what's called a magnitude. So if I have 0.5, which is half, and I multiply it by 10, it becomes the number 5. It's now the whole number 5. And now it's no longer 0.5 representing half. Now it's 5 wholes if I do that.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. So, all right. So I realize that as we do this, we probably need a variable to store our final number, right? So I'm going to use a double, and I'm going to call that, I'll call that dub val, just so we can make it short for double value, right? Tell me what math you think we should use here. How do I take my whole number? Well, actually, I kind of like where you were going with this. Let's start with just the numerator and the denominator. How do I take the numerator and the denominator and get the matching decimal value of what that fraction is?
I would assume so. Like you're asking, how do I get the decimal out of that?
Yeah. In fact, you know what? I know I just asked that question, but let me ask a different question just to kind of change our thinking. Let's look at the fraction. Let's look at the fraction 1/2. Okay, so 1/2. What does 1/2 actually mean?
It means 0.5.
Okay, it results in 0.5. That's the answer after the math is done. But what does 1/2 actually mean?
1/2.
Well, that's how we say it. That's its name.
Yeah.
But in terms of math, what does 1/2 actually mean? When I say 1/2, what mathematical function am I invoking?
Oh, 1 divided by 2.
That's right. It's division, where 1 is inside the division operator and 2 is the divisor, right? So if we take that notion and we put it in code, we are literally saying 1 divided by 2, right? And by the way, side note, I imagine the stream is on a delay, and so what I'm typing on the screen probably doesn't show up for you for a moment while we're talking, and I apologize for that. So, 'cause that could be
it's good. Don't worry.
awesome. Thanks, man. So we have 1 divided by 2, right? And when I type that, right now I have it hard-coded, right? So it's 1, the whole number 1, divided by the whole number 2. In Java, if I divide with 2 whole numbers, what kind of result am I going to get?
Sorry, can you repeat that one more time real quick?
Yeah, no problem, no problem. In Java, if I do division with 2 whole numbers, what kind of result am I going to get? Am I going to get a whole number result, or am I going to get a floating point result?
Yeah, you're going to get a whole number result, so you need to make it a double or a float.
In fact, for the purposes of our little demo here, I'm going to go ahead and print out dubval, and I'm going to execute this code several times over time. So right now, sure enough, even though my result variable is a double, so it's going to store a double, the math I'm performing, 1/2, is still integral math. And so the result that comes back from that integral math is 0. When that 0, that integer, gets stored in the double, it automatically gets promoted to be a double type. But 0 promoted to a double is just 0.0. So when the code executes, my double just says 0.0. It looks like I have a double, but in truth, the math was a whole number and then promoted to a double. So how do I fix that, Tobin? How do I take this from whole number math to be floating point math?
From what I've read online, you have to like multiply it by something.
That is one option, but that's kind of dirty pool. Well, it's not totally dirty. It's more like, please forgive the expression, it's more like a newbie hack, right? What they want to do is they want to force a promotion. Right now I have hard-coded numbers 1/2, right? And so they're saying things like, hey, if you multiply any of these operands, if you multiply like 1, for example, because it's the first one, if you multiply that by 0.0, no, don't do that, do 1.0, then you turn that whole number 1, without changing its value, you turn it into a double. It now becomes 1.0, and now it's a double. But that's kind of painfully unnecessary. If we have hard-coded whole numbers, remember, we can just add the letter D at the end, and it turns it into a double at the compiler level. Now it's not treated like an integer, now it's treated like a double. Similarly, I can treat it like a float by adding an F instead of a D, and it turns that number into a float. Does this sound familiar, Tobin?
Yes.
Okay, cool. But in this case, we don't have hard-coded numbers during the math. In this case, we have variables. We have I described the whole number. That's not going to be a smart thing. We have the numerator and we have the denominator, right? And so these are variable names. And we can't just add F or D to the ends of these names, because then it changes the spelling of the names, and the compiler thinks we're asking for a different variable. So we can't just add F and D to the ends of these. That will change their spelling, not change their data type. So do you remember how we take a variable and we force it to be a different data type? Right now our variables are ints. How do we force the numerator, for example, to be, let's do a double type. How do we force numerator, which is an int, to be a double type?
Don't you cast it to a double?
And how do we cast to a double?
You'd put double in parentheses before.
That's exactly correct. So now I've made the numerator behave like a double. I've made the compiler promote numerator temporarily to a double for the purposes of this math, right? So if I do that, if numerator is a double and denominator is an int, and Java can only do math between like types, what's going to happen to denominator automatically?
It should automatically turn into a double, right?
That's right. It will automatically promote to a double. So if I now run this math, if I run the math at this point, if I go ahead and hit play, I got to save first. If I go ahead and hit play, then it's going to go ahead and return an actual 0.5. So right now we're closer to the answer we want than where we were before, right?
Right.
So once I have the decimal value from the numerator and the denominator, how do I incorporate the whole number so that it doesn't just say 0.5, it says 2.5? How do I do that?
You'd want to do what we did above. So where we put double up there, we want to do that to the whole number and add that to dub val.
That is correct. In fact, if we want to have a little bit of fun, well, if we want to keep this simple, we can just put a parenthetical around our division, including the double cast, and then right before that we can just say whole plus and then the result of that division. If we do whole plus and then the result of that division, we can go ahead and hit play and we'll get 2.5. We've now incorporated the whole number into the division double result. All in one line, all nice and clean. This is, for those who are watching, this is how we turn our fraction into a final decimal value. It's one line of code and it's super easy. This kind of goes back to the principle that I've talked about multiple times before. You know, oftentimes in computer science, we think that the words computer and science automatically form this law that everything has to be as hard as possible. And when we get situations like this, check this out. I've got 3 ints, and using those 3 ints, I can do 2 mathematical operations in the same line, and I will get a decimal conversion of that fraction. It is one line of code. It is super simple. Oftentimes, the answers to our problems in computer science are super simple, and we have to be willing to accept that the simple answer is the answer. Does that help you out, Tobin?
Yeah, that helps me out a lot. It's a lot easier than what the internet was telling me to do. So,
well, the internet is full of meth. So, anyway, awesome, dude. Right now, I don't see anybody else in the queue at this time. Do you have another question you want to go over?
Not at the moment. That was basically it. That's literally the only thing that's stopping me from turning this in right now. So,
sweet. Well, good on you, man. Awesome. Thanks for being here. I'm going to go ahead and I can either drag you over to the general channel, or if you just want to hop back into the general channel, you're more than welcome to.
Yeah, I can do that.
Awesome, man. Thanks for being here, and thanks for the question. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Excellent and well done. All right, cool. So this is how we convert our fraction to a decimal. Hopefully this helps a few of you out with this question. All right, cool. I'm going to go ahead and grab this, and you know what? Goodbye. There we go. That code is gone. All right. I don't see anyone else who has a question just yet, so I'm going to keep going with some of our random number talk, because I like random numbers. Like, I don't know if you knew this or not. But I'm actually a huge RPG nut. In fact, my room, I'll be honest with you, my wife's working on a project over to the left, and so my room, my media room's a bit messier than I should like normally, and that's okay because I love my wife and I love you, babe. And she can work on this project as long as she wants. But over that way, well, you know what? Whatever. I'm not gonna be a schmuck. I'm not gonna be embarrassed. Check this out, right? I'm a huge RPG nut, and so over there you'll see that there's this bookcase, and hopefully it represents well. The bottom 2 shelves are filled left to right. I believe, yeah, they are perfectly filled left to right with RPG books. In fact, the vast majority of those books over there belong to the Palladium series of RPGs. I have a ton of books for the game Rifts. And I also, because I'm a zombie apocalypse fan, I'm a survival horror nut. I also have a bunch of books for a game called Dead Rain. Now, why am I telling you this? Because this sounds completely off topic. It's not really that off topic. I'm an RPG nut, and what I love about RPGs is that it's so easy to build tools for RPGs if you know a little code, right? One of the most common things to build for an RPG is a dice roller. And what do dice do for us in an RPG? Dice generate random values in a given range. So how do we get random numbers in a given range? How do we do that? Well, first, we need a random object. In fact, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do what I did with buffered reader. And I'm going to add a public static random object. And I'm going to call this, if you guys are fantasy novel fans at all, you might get this joke. For those of you who aren't that into fantasy, you should really read The Wheel of Time. It's great for you if you don't know what this joke is. Hey, you know what? To make this a little bit more accessible, I'm just going to call this, there we go. All right. So, I've got my random object, right? I've got my random object. And I'm going to go ahead and in my main method, I'm going to have, let's call this, let's see, int, and let's call it stat roll. Okay. Now I'm going to start this off at 0, but normally, in a lot of RPG systems, a stat roll is based on rolling 3 6-sided dice, right? 3 6-sided dice. Hey, pro tip, the singular, so dice is plural, right? Dice is plural. The singular of dice is die. And there's a reason for that. It goes back to manufacturing. But yeah, singular is die, plural is dice. Don't know if you knew this or not, but I used to be an English major. So, a stat roll, a standard stat roll in a lot of RPG systems is going to be 3d6, okay? And hang on a second. My buddy William Mercer wants to be moved into the admin room, I think. Right? Although I think William can move into here with me. William, were you trying to get moved into the admin room?
Yeah, I was waiting to let you know that a couple of people had questions, and I don't think they have mics at the moment. But Austin Lenhart and Felix were both asking for information on how to set up the do while loop to get it to return from the sub menu with the fraction math to the main menu.
Ooh, okay. That's an awesome question. I'll tell you what. In fact, you know what I'm going to do? Because I don't want to constantly like delete my code and then retype my code and all that stuff. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to come all the way down here. Let's see. I'm going to stop bastardizing main. That's what I'm going to do. I haven't taught you guys about bastardizing main yet, but to be honest with you, the way we've been using main is completely terrible and horrible and disgusting. But we do that because we're just exploring, right? We're just testing things out. And when you're just exploring and you're testing things out, it's okay to bastardize main. But in a real application, we wouldn't do that. Instead, we would make more methods, which is something we haven't discussed yet. For the purposes of today's demo, I'm going to make a couple of methods. I'm going to make one method for your question that's currently being asked. Like in this case, how do we go from a sub menu to the outer menu, which I think is the question, right, William? It's how to go from a sub to an outer, or is it how to go from a sub to the end?
It's how to go from the sub back to the main menu.
Okay, yeah. All right, so we'll be going from a sub menu to the outer menu. And then I'll have another method for just whatever demo I want to run in the middle of questions, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a public static void method, and we're going to call this, let's call this method exiting sub menu, right? And we don't need to pass any data into this method, so we're just going to have empty parentheses. So exiting submenu, that is going to be the question we're answering right now. And what I'm going to do in my main method now is I'm just going to call the method representing the question currently being asked. Since they're in the same class program, and since they're both static, they can see each other. And so main can call exiting submenu just by mentioning its name and then using the curly brace, or I'm sorry, using the parentheses. Since the declaration has no values in here, like it doesn't say int x or anything, I don't have to pass any data in to call this method. All right, so I've got this method that represents your question. How do we leave a submenu and return to an outer menu? In other words, we might have, I don't know, hypothetically speaking, we might have some main menu that when we choose something, then takes us to an inner menu. Excuse me, hiccup, sorry. So let's go ahead and establish our outer menu first. And I'm going to say, I'm going to call this the main menu string, and I'm just going to give this some really simple options, right? I'm going to give this some really simple options. First, I'm going to just put the name of the menu that's currently printing so that we know which one's which. So I'm going to say main menu, and then I have a colon. And then I'm going to bump it down a line. And I'm just going to have some numbered options. Normally, I would put in choose one of the following as a prompt for the... Oh my gosh. I did that thing where my face is on screen the whole time, even though I'm typing stuff. I'm so sorry, guys. I should have been showing you this code the whole time. I'm a dingus. All right. So, declared a new method, public static void.
Not to like interrupt, but the person who was actually asking the question said that they had a switch in their thing, and I don't know the exact setup, but they're now in the waiting to be moved channel if you'd like to ask them specifically their scenario.
Oh, that's a good idea. And I do like that. Thank you very much, Mr. Mercer. Awesome. And Felix, how you doing? Remember, you got to push to talk?
You have to hold it down whenever you use it.
Yeah. Sorry, I wasn't inside of Discord.
Oh, that's no problem, man. And your microphone's a little quiet, just so you're aware.
All right, I'll try to speak up right now.
All right, so you've got a switch in your menu, which is super smart. I like that idea. I have not shown switches yet, and so I'm happy to go over that with you guys today as well. But what's the problem you're really experiencing?
Okay, so...
Oh, I lost you again, Felix.
Okay, so basically what I have right now is like a Boolean like our menu to return back to, and I have it set to true, and then our menu doesn't equal false, I have it print out my main menu. And then I have switch choice, and then case 1, which is the reduce a fraction, and then case 2 fraction math, I have it set to do, and then it prints out the fraction math menu. And then I just did case 1 and then had it print out add, case 2 subtract for now, just so I know that they all work. And when I hit case 5, that's where I have it return to the main menu.
Okay, so in case 5, you're going to change the value of your Boolean, is that correct?
So so case 6 changes the value of my Boolean to false, so that goes straight to the end. Whereas case 5,
but oh, I see. So case 5 is returned to the main menu, is that correct?
Yes.
And then case 6 is exit the program?
Yes.
Okay, all right, just want to make sure I understand, so go on.
Okay, so for case 2 underneath the main menu, I have a do, prints the main menu and everything, and then the whale is, as long as the user's choice doesn't equal 5 or doesn't equal 6, to just repeat itself. And whenever I put in, so if you choose case 5, I have it change the user input, which also changes the choice to 5, and it still just keeps looping.
All right, so there are a couple of things at work here. And I'll be honest with you, I'm probably going to have to type some of this out as you read it to me, or have you could even copy it and paste it into the text chat. Let's see. Right now we're in a voice chat. But if you were to... Mr. Mercer, what's the best way for him to send me text that I can take a look at?
If it's just a small portion of it, then he could copy and paste it into a private message. You just have to click on your name in this channel, right click into the message thing and paste it, and then send. If it's going to be like the entire thing, then he would probably need to just start up a like small message and then do the zip file and then send the attachment to you.
At this point, I think it's just I just want to see like the switch logic. So we just need to have like a copy pasta basically.
Okay.
So let's see. Yeah, I see. Yeah, I've got the private message here. So can you send me the snippet of code that you're talking about, Mr. Felix?
Yes, I can. I'll just send it part by part down to where I'm talking about.
Yeah, sounds awesome. All right, so Felix is going to give us the example, and this is one of those times where, you know, I'm always a little hesitant to show off student code. I want to see his code, and if I feel like it's safe, I'll share it with you guys on the stream. If once I see his code and I can get a really clear picture of how it's functioning, I may make an analog example in the code that we're doing on the stream so that, you know, we're not accidentally committing academic misconduct. So also, if I show you code, it's not academic misconduct, so you don't have to worry about it. So let's see. So Felix is going to go get that code and he's going to copy and paste that in. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and let's see. What he was talking about was having some Boolean. He uses a flag like we talked about yesterday, right? I'm trying to decide I just wanted to figure out the order of declarations here just for readability. So Boolean, I'm just going to have exit now. I'm going to set that to false. That'll be like I want to leave the whole thing, right? That'll be like I want to leave the whole thing. And then I might have Boolean continue main, meaning continue through the main menu. And that's going to just be set to true for right now. And then I'm going to have another Boolean called continue sub. Now, do I need to have all these Booleans? Maybe not. Maybe not. But I'm going to set them up right now. And if I don't need them, I'll dump them or whatever the case may be. But I want to make sure that these are readable, that these are declarative statements, and that they are set to, in my opinion, what the defaults will be to have those loops continue. I might have a main menu where the first option is just do again. This would be when I want to repeat the main menu. And then I might have a second option called go deeper. Now this is where we're going to go into a submenu. And then my personal favorite, whenever I have an exit option for an app, and you don't have to do this, but I find that it helps users a little bit, I like to have a 0 option that is separated from the main options. And I'll just call that exit. And then finally, here is where I'll make a new line and I'll say enter the number. Maybe I should spell number right. Number of your choice, right? So here is my main menu string. Now, I also want to make it a string for my submenu. And here I'm going to put submenu so that we know which menu is printing. And I'm just kind of keeping an eye on the stream here. Real good. There we go. Oh, look at that. You sent me so Felix sent me the text. Oh, nope. Oops, there we go. Let's go ahead and open this up. Gosh dang it. Keeps popping up on my main screen, which I don't want, but that's okay. I'm taking a look at Felix's code right now. So let's see. Reviewing his code. He has an R main menu Boolean. Okay, that makes sense. And then okay, minor thing, Felix, and it's not, you're not doing anything, you're doing something really interesting to me. You're doing something really interesting that I'd like to show on the stream right now for everyone's benefit, including your own, okay? So.
Sounds good.
Awesome. So here we go. Gosh dang. What is going on? Wait, I'm just trying to, oh, gosh dang it. I'm trying to cancel. Something I did on accident. Hang on. That's obnoxious. All right, here we go. This is something interesting. Here's a principle at work. I'll come back to this whole submenu thing in just a second. Imagine for a second that I have a do while loop. Remember, whenever we do menus, do while is the way to go because you need to present it at least once before you know if you're going to need to loop. So let's say I have my main menu loop, okay? And I want this thing to loop so long as the continue main is true, right? Felix, you did something interesting. You actually said, hey, so long as this thing is not false, right? Well, you're talking about a Boolean. If the Boolean is not false, what is the Boolean?
True.
That is correct. So we wouldn't ever say as long as it's not false. We would just say as long as it's true. Because that's the same thing, right? Now, the other thing that's interesting here is, and to be honest with you, I think I presented this to one of my 3 sections, and I haven't gone over this heavy-handedly, so don't feel bad. But what you've done here, this is a very common thing for people new to coding will do, but it's also highly redundant and unnecessary, and here's why. Keep in mind that this variable is a Boolean, right? So it's going to evaluate to either true or false, all on its own. This is a Boolean literal. It is only ever going to be true, like we have here, or false, like we did before. And then finally, you have a Boolean operator. This is an operation that when it's done, will return a Boolean. So right now, we have a condition that is using 3 Booleans, right? It's using a variable, a literal, and then in an operation, it's producing a third. Does that make sense?
I think it will once the stream catches up.
Oh, that's a good point. So in my condition, I have my Boolean continue main equals true. So continue main is a variable that's going to be true or false. True is just always true. And then equals is going to return a Boolean. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Cool. So what's interesting about that is the way we have this written, when continue main is true, the whole thing is true. And when continue main is false, the whole thing is false. Well, what we can do instead is we don't need the equals true. We can actually delete that so that our while simply says while continue main, or in your case, while our main menu. And it's the exact same thing. So instead of having 3 Booleans involved, we have 1 Boolean involved and we get the exact same result. Does that concept make sense?
Yes, it does.
Awesome, awesome. So for going forward, and this is for everyone. This is for everyone, okay? Going forward, we never put a Boolean literal in those parentheses. Not for an if, not for an else if, not for a loop of any kind, because we don't need to. We can either do a Boolean operation between 2 variables or methods that return Booleans, or we can just use the Boolean variable itself, and that thing, that variable, will by its nature evaluate to either true or false depending on how it's set by that time. This goes back to us using flags yesterday in our loop example. You might recall that in that demo code, in those flags, I just use the variable itself. I don't do variable equals anything. So don't feel bad. Everybody new to code, including myself, does that. They take the variable equals some Boolean literal. Don't do that. Just use the Boolean itself. Okay, guys? All right, so going back to the code. So in your particular case, Felix, you've got this while loop, and basically while this Boolean is true, you want to print the main menu, giving the options, inside of which you get the user's input and you parse it to an int. So far, that's the statement, right? Like we're going from inside your while loop to the first 7 lines of code, right?
Yes.
And then we go into the switch. For those who don't know, and looking at my code, this is kind of what's going on, right? We have the prompt. I'm going to go ahead and prompt the user with the main menu string. And then I'm going to go ahead and read their input, sorry, C# habits string input with the input reader dot read line, like we've done like a billion times before. Come on, there we go. And then finally, I'm matching what Felix is doing here. I'm going to go ahead and have an int choice that equals that input parsed to an int. Awesome. So now that I'm using a different method than main, I need to add the throws declaration statement to get rid of that red squiggle worm of death. There we go. Okay, so I've got my, you might notice that for the most part, I declare my variables that belong to the method as a whole. I declare my variables in advance, and then I start using internal variables as I need to, like this int choice only belongs to the loop, really. All right, so I've got the prompt, I read the input, I parse to an int, and now we're going to use something called a switch. A switch is super cool because a switch acts like a series of if-else statements where, an if-else ifs, I should say, where the only thing you're checking for is exact equality. You're not looking for greater than, less than. You're not looking for this condition and some other condition, or this condition or some other condition. So you're looking for a single condition where that single condition is exact equality. So for example, we're in a situation where I'm going to present the user with multiple choices. Each choice is numbered 0, 1, or 2. When I go to act on that choice, I'm looking for exact inputs. Either they entered 0, they entered 1, they entered 2, or they missed the boat entirely, and I'm going to be like, hey, that's invalid input. So here's my switch, and I'm going to, when we write a switch, we use the switch keyword, and then we say what variable or what value we're switching on. In this case, we want to check choice to see what value it is. We add some curly braces to give the switch a block, and then we add some cases. So in case 1, in other words, when they chose to do case 1, if they entered the number 1, they chose option 1, then I'm simply going to say, I'm going to go ahead in this case, and I'll just print out, let's do it again, because what they're saying is they want to repeat the main menu in my example. After that, we do a case 2. If they choose number 2 instead, then I might say, to the submenu, right? Something like that. And then, let's see, what do I want to do here? I'm trying to decide if I want to put the submenu inside this case, which kind of is gross in my opinion, or if I want to do the submenu outside of this switch. I probably want to do the submenu outside of this switch. I might change my mind later. I'm finicky like that. Case 0. Notice that these are not in numeric order. That's okay. They're just in the order in which they're being checked. Oh, and excuse me, I forgot something important. Whenever we do cases in a switch, we need to have a break statement. What we say here is, once you've chosen this thing and you get this consequence, the switch needs to stop checking cases or to stop doing consequences. If we don't have that break statement, it's going to do what's called fall through, and it's going to, from the point that it's true, it's just going to start doing every consequence. And that's a problem. So after every consequence, if you don't want it to do all the consequences after that, you need to put in a break statement. And then finally with case 0, I'm just going to say, sounds like you're done. And then I'll take some other actions here in just a moment, and that will exit out of everything. Okay. In fact, at this point, we want to make sure that continue main is set to false. Notice that now case 0 has more than one consequence, and that's okay. There are implied curly braces here for each case, if you will. So we have to set continue main to false. We want to set exit now to true. And we'll take it on from there. And then finally, what about the case where they chose some other number that was not 0, 1, or 2. Oh, hang on a second. Hey, Luke, what's going on? Oh, check this out, guys. Check this out. This is interrupting the stream, and that's okay. Hey, Luke, can you say hi? Look at the camera.
Show you his muscles.
Yep, come here. He's showing me his muscles. Good muscles, buddy. Wow, he's got good muscles.
Well, he did just work out.
Yeah, and I did Taiwan and then.
Sweet. Love you, Luke. Close my door, please. And that's my son. That's the one who wins at Fortnite. Like more than anybody in the house. Okay. Sorry for the interruption. Here we go. So let's imagine for a moment that they enter some number other than 1, 2, or 0. You need to have a default statement here. And the default case here says they entered something that was invalid. And so here I might be like, bro, that wasn't an option. Try again. Okay. And then oh, wait. I forgot something important here. I forgot the break. See, we all make mistakes. Yay. All right, cool. And you know what? For indentation reasons, I don't know why Eclipse does this, but I like to indent my cases and my defaults so they're all inside the switch curlies. And technically your default does not need a break statement because it's the end of the switch, so you don't have to worry about any fall through effects. All right, cool. So in the case where they say they want to repeat the outer menu, we're going to go ahead, or the main menu, we're going to go ahead and just say, hey, let's do it again and move on. In the case they want to go to the sub menu, we're going to do, we're going to print the sub menu information here and then move on. Otherwise, we're going to make a lot of changes and have some messages here. Okay. So let's see. How do I want to do this? Because I'm trying to figure out how to get into the sub menu because I'm trying to answer your question, Felix. Let's see. I'm looking at your code and I'm looking at my code to see if I can find some analog here. I don't want to get too lost in the details. So what I think one of the problems that you're having, Felix, oh, okay, you know what, you do a do loop here. I'll do a do loop here also. So inside my second case, I'm going to go ahead and say, fine, let's run the submenu. I'm going to go ahead and add a do. It's going to have a while. But this while is a little bit more complicated because let's think about when we want this thing to loop and when we want this thing to exit. I want this thing to loop so long as continue sub is true and so long as they do not want to exit now. So in other words, in my while condition, I've got the variables continue sub. That's in my example. That's how we know that we want to continue the sub menu. We want to repeat the sub menu, and double ampersand, not exit now. So I've got the bang. I've got the exclamation mark. Exit now. So what I'm saying is, if continue sub is true and exit now is false, keep running this menu. If at any time they want to exit the application, I'm going to set exit now to true, which means that this condition will fail when it gets checked next time. And then it's going to exit back to the main menu. If at any time they decide that they don't want to continue the sub menu, but they want to go back to the main menu, but they don't want to exit the application, then continue sub will be set to false, and that part will fail, and we'll go back to the main menu. But exit now will still be false, and we won't exit the main menu and exit the app entirely. So let's look at this in action so that, because speaking it doesn't work so well. Let's look at this in action. Let me finish my submenu prompt here by adding sort of the same idea here. Run sub again. And then let's do return to main menu as our second option. And then let's have an exit app option as a number 0, okay? So in other words, my sub menu is eerily similar to my main menu, but it's only going to run if first I enter the main menu and choose main menu's option 2, then I'm going to run the sub menu. And I'm really going to pretty much do the exact same thing again. I'm going to just say, okay, cool, let's prompt them, this time with the sub menu string. And I have two choices here. I can either reuse input and choice variables inside my submenu, but that can be a little dangerous sometimes because sometimes you want to preserve the choice they made in main last time, versus the choice they're making in sub now. This is not that case. This is not the case where I want to preserve their options separate of each other. At least I don't think so. So I'm just going to reuse the input variable and the choice variable. So input is going to equal, let's see, what did I say? Input reader. That's the name of my buffered reader. I can actually just grab this code up here. Input reader dot read line. And I'm going to set their choice equal to, once again, integer dot parse int input. So now that I'm in the sub menu, their choice represents their choice for the sub menu. And I'm going to do essentially what I did in main. I'm going to just go ahead and start a switch statement and do a switch on choice. Where, I hate that Eclipse auto indents this thing differently than I like. Where case 1 is I want to say, let's run the sub again. And then we're going to simply repeat the sub menu. So no changes there. In fact, to be safe, I'm going to set continue sub to true because I may be returning to the sub menu after having exited the sub menu previously. So I want to make sure that continue sub is set to true. Similarly, you know what? Continue the main menu. You know, now that I think about it, I don't think I need the continue main to be a Boolean. I'll get back to that later. Break out of case 1. Here's case 2. And case 2 is I want to return to the main menu. So I'm going to say, as a matter of just sort of tracking, let's go back to the main menu. And then I'm going to set continue sub to false. Break. Case 0 is very interesting. Case 0 is me saying I want to end the application entirely. I want to exit the sub menu, and I want to exit the main menu, and I want to end the application, right? So here I'm going to say, just like I did in main menu. Actually, hang on a second. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and say, just like I did in main menu, I'm going to say, hey, sounds like you're done. And then I will set continue sub is false. And we will set exit now to true. And the more I look at this, the more I realize that continue main doesn't even need to exist. So I'm probably going to refactor and remove those. And then I'm going to go ahead and break out of case 0. And then finally, with default, I'm going to say, dude, that wasn't an option because they entered some number other than 1, 2, or 0, 1, or 2. That wasn't an option. Try again. Right? Okay. Realizing that I don't need this other Boolean, I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of it. I'm going to go ahead and I'll just comment it out in case it ends up that I'm wrong twice. And down here, I'll comment this out. And for the main menu, I want that loop to continue so long as we do not wish to exit now. So that is not exit now in the condition of the main while, of the main do while. All right, so I realize this is a lot of code. This is a big blob of code, and it can be a little hard to read. So let's just go through it one more time before we test it. And I'll go ahead and bump this out of the way so it doesn't break up the readability. All right. We declare at the beginning, we declare 2 Booleans. One that determines whether we want to exit the app as a whole, and one that determines if we want to leave the submenu, or if we want to continue the submenu again. I have 2 strings, one for the main menu that gives me all my main menu options, and one for the submenu that gives me my submenu options. After that, I start the main menu loop, and it's a do while. Because remember, with all menus, I got to prompt first before I know what to do. And so I've got my do, and I give my main menu print, and then I've got my input reader, which I parse to a choice. Once I have the choice from the user, I'm going to operate on a switch. Remember that a switch is just a bunch of if-else ifs, where I'm checking for exact equality. When I say case 1, what I'm really saying is I'm doing like if choice equals that case number. In this case, it's case 1. It's the exact same thing, just written slightly differently. And if it's true that they chose 1, I want to print the message, do it again, and then I'm going to break. When I break, I leave the switch, and it comes all the way down to the while condition. Since I didn't change exit now to true, it's going to repeat my loop, where it's going to print the main menu, read the input, parse, and then check the switch. All right. If I do number 2 in the main menu, it's going to give my it's going to go to my sub menu and do a very similar process. Okay, let's test this, because to be honest with you, who knows if I've got this code right? I may have made a mistake somewhere. So let's go ahead and run this code. I've got my main menu. I can either do it again, go deeper, or exit. Let's do it again first just to make sure that works. And sure enough, I'm in the main menu and it runs a few times. Okay, great. Let's go deeper. Let's go to the sub menu. And here it says to the submenu, and then I get my submenu option. I want to run the submenu again. Okay, good. I'm still in the submenu. Now let's return to the main menu. Return to the main menu says I want to go back to the main menu, but I don't want to exit the application. So now we've gone back to the main menu, and the main menu is running. I hit 1, and it's still the main menu. I hit 2, we go back to the sub. If I hit 0, 0 is exit. This should take me out of the entire application. It should not go back to the main menu first. Right? It should just exit the app. Sounds like you're done and the app is over. So in this example code, granted it's a lot of example code and it was kind of convoluted to get here. I get that. But what I really want you to get is the structure. I have one menu inside of a loop that leads to a submenu. And at any point, given these logical checks, I can change Booleans such that the inner menu ends, but the outer menu does not. Or the entire application comes to an end. The real trick with writing logic in code is making sure that you get the logic in the right sequence and that you have the right conditions, which is like all of logic in general. I get that. But getting your operations in the right sequence, that's the key. Okay, Felix, I have talked a ton. I've talked a ton. Did any of this demo actually help you with the problem that you've got? In fact, to be honest with you, I'm not even sure. There's Felix. Hey, how's it going, bud?
I accidentally got moved out of the channel.
What's that? You got booted out of the channel?
I think he did. I moved him back in just now.
Oh, gotcha. All right. So I talked a ton. Felix, did this actually help you with your problem? Now that you see the sample code, does this actually help you with the problem?
Yeah, it helps me a lot, actually.
Mr. Mercer, what was that?
Sorry, I'm playing a game right now and I didn't mute my mic.
That's fair. All right, so Felix, I'm sorry, one more time. Did that help you out?
Yes, that helped me out incredibly.
Awesome. Okay. In that case, because this is a lot of code and a lot to digest, I'm going to put this question to bed. Is that okay?
That's fine.
All good, man. All good. All right, thanks, Felix, for your question. That was great. All right, what time are we at? We're at 11:10. So to reduce the visual noise, I'm going to go ahead and minimize this method. If you guys have a question and you would like to ask it live and get an answer, that's perfectly fine. Just let the mods know that you'd like to ask a question live, and we can get you moved over to the right channel, and then I'll know to pull you in for convo. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and let's return to our random code example. Okay. So I'm going to add a new method here called public static void. I'm going to call this roll dice. You might notice that whenever we name a method, we name it after a verbed phrase, something that we want to do, something that we want to accomplish. So I want to roll dice. Now I created a random object at the class level. That means that since it's a static random object, that means that every static method has access to that object. I don't have to declare it over and over again. I can just use it. So, like I said earlier, it's often the case, it's common that a stat roll is 3 6-sided dice rolled and added together, right? Rolled and added together. Now, when we say, just so that you understand the parlance, when we say 3 6-sided dice, we often say 3d6. That gives us the quantity that we're rolling dice is the D, and then 6 is the number of sides on that die. So if I wanted to simulate rolling 3 6-sided dice, that means what I really want is to add 3 random numbers between 1 and 6, right? I want to get 3 random numbers between 1 and 6 inclusive. That means that 1 and 6 are valid values. And I want to add them together to give me a total. So I might have an int here, and let's call this, I'm gonna make this a little bit longhand so that you can see how everything works. I'm gonna do roll 1, and we're going to talk to random savage, our random object. And we're gonna call next int, but remember that next int returns any int. That means negative 2.147 billion to positive 2.147 billion. And we don't want 4 1/4 possible options here, right? We want to have just 1 through 6. So how do we do that? Well, it ends up that next int comes in a couple of flavors. If I start typing next int and I go to the autofill with control space, you'll see that next int has a bound. And if I select this one, I get the description off to the right, and you'll see that it says that it returns a random number.
You're on face
between. What's that?
You're on face cam. Oh. I don't know if that's on purpose, but
no, thank you. I appreciate that. I do that way too much. I even have my OBS open so I can see when I do that, and I haven't been paying attention. Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
So okay. So if I look at this description, it returns a value that starts at 0. That means it could return 0. Keep that in mind. And it goes up to the upper bound exclusive. That's an important point. So for example, if I call next int and I give it an upper bound of 6, what this really returns...
Oh, I was wanting to alert you that you were on Basecam.
I just told him.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I'm not on Facecam now, though, from what I can see. So I'm good. But thank you. I appreciate that.
No problem.
So what this method really returns is 0 through 5, not 1 through 6. And what I really need is 1 through 6. So how can I fix this? You might be, some of you who are a little math savvy, you'll figure this out really fast. You might be tempted to bump this up to 7. If you do that, that will give me 0 through 6. So I can get 6 as an option. That's good, but the problem is 0 is also still an option, and that's not good. But if I keep the range 0 to 5, you might notice that that is still 6 numbers. That is still 0 through 6, or 0 through 5, right? So 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's still 6 digits. It's just that my range is 1 over from where I want to be. Well, in math, if I ever have a range and I want to shift it, what do I have to do? I just have to add. I just have to add to the range itself. To the range, not to the upper bound, but to the range itself. So the way we do that is after we get our number back from Random Savage, once we get 0 through 5, we take that value and we add 1 to it. If I add 1 to it after the random, then 0 becomes 1, 1 becomes 2, blah, 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 5 becomes 6, right? So in other words, that is how we change our range from 0 through 5 to be 1 through 6, right? So if I add 1 to the random value, I get 1 through 6. Yeah, my comment got long there, but that's okay. I'll just put that above my code, and then it's readable. There we go. So what this really returns is 0 through 5. But if I add 1 to the random number after it's returned, I'll get 1 through 6. Hopefully that makes a lot of sense. And now if I take that logic and repeat it twice, just make it different variable names, I now have 3 different D6 rolls. With 3 different D6 rolls, I can now add these things. Now that I've got these 3 ints, I can add them together to make the stat roll. It's going to be roll 1 plus roll 2 plus roll 3. Now, if I knew for loops, I could do this in a for loop. It'd be much faster, much easier, much simpler code. But we're not using for loops yet, and I want to show you how random works, so this works out just fine. And then finally, I'm going to go ahead and do a sys out and do my stat roll so that we can see that this works. Remember that if I make a new method that I want to call, I've got to actually go back to in this case, my main method, and call the method that I'm demoing. And when I hit play, there's our outcome. This time it was 13. If I hit play again, now it's 15. If I hit play again, it's 16. Wow, that's interesting. There's 13, there's 12, there's 13, okay, right? You know, this is kind of cool, but maybe we should check our random numbers to make sure that's what we're actually getting. Whatever. We're fine. So, yeah, we're getting some, look, there's a 9, there's a 10. Yeah, so you get random outcomes over and over again every time we hit play. The point is, I didn't change my code, but the outcome is different because I'm using random values. This is how you can use a random object to generate random values in cases where you need to determine random outcomes, like especially in game development. But you also might need a random value for testing purposes, or you might need a random value for the consequence of some logic. For example, I have this devious idea in my head that involves a timer. And that timer will be in random intervals between a certain range. Sometimes the timer will be a minute, sometimes it'll be 3 minutes, sometimes it'll be 45 seconds or 47 seconds. And so if I want the timer to be randomly set so that the alarm goes off at a time that I can't determine in advance, then I want to be able to set that interval to a random value. So random values are not just for games; they're also for tools, like a random timer that randomly goes off, and then something happens. Don't be afraid to come to class. Anyway, so yeah, that's how we use randoms. I think that's a pretty okay demo of random. I don't think we need to go any further with that. All right, now let's see. I don't have anyone in the queue yet to ask a question, and that's okay. Do you guys have any other questions? We've got another 40 minutes here tops. If you guys don't have any other questions, if you've gotten the help that you need and you can move on and do your own code, that's fine. You don't have to hang around. You don't have to stick around and check this out. This, of course, will be archived off to YouTube again, so that if you got something valuable out of this, but maybe you forgot how it goes or you'd like to see the example again, then you can go off to the YouTube and you can check it there and review it as much as you want. If I post anything to YouTube, if I post anything in the announcements, if I give you a code sample, none of it is academic misconduct. It's all public information. So it's safe to use, okay? All right. In that case, let me see. I think I'll come up with one more interesting thing. And then if we don't have any questions by then, we'll just pull the plug and we'll be done. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and collapse this method. For those of you who don't know, if you see these plus minuses on the left-hand side, you can collapse your methods down. It does not eliminate your code. It just visually hides it so that you're not staring at a big wall of text all day, right? Also, as you can see, if I hover over that plus symbol, excuse me, it will give me a preview of what that method looks like when it's expanded. I can read through it that way, and then I can see how it works without having to expand it and clutter up my view. All right. One more thing I kind of want to drive home, and this returns to something that we talked about yesterday, is I want to do a public static void method for, let's do modifying strings. Because there's something very important here I really want to drive home and make sure you understand. The first principle you must understand is that strings are immutable. Now, when I say immutable, what I mean is once set, a string's content, to be clear, a string's content, meaning its characters, can never be changed. Now think about that for a second. In class, haven't we had situations where we had a string and then we added something onto the end of that string to make it a bigger string? Haven't we taken string 1 and string 2 and concatenated them and then the string was bigger? Didn't that change the string? Or better yet, let me muddy the water just a little bit more. Like I did earlier in my example, I have string and I'll just call it greeting like I did before. And I'll just say hello, and I'll keep it kind of short today. Hello. And then later on, I say greeting plus equals. Remember that compound operator from earlier? This is me saying, hey, take the value of greeting and add to it. How are you? And then if I print this thing out, if I print greeting, right? If I print the greeting variable, it says, oh, wait, hang on a second. Nothing's going to happen until I actually call this method. Modifying strings. There we go. There we are. And play. If I call that method and I print that string, doesn't the, look, the string actually says, hello, how are you? So didn't I change my string? Didn't I make my string bigger? Here's the truth of the universe. What I did was originally I created a variable called string or called greeting, and it pointed to the string value. In this case, it started off as hello. But really, a string is an object that lives out in memory space called the heap. It lives out in this heap. And that variable, that greeting variable, simply points to that string that says greeting. Or that says hello. Gosh, I'm mixing up my words. I'm sorry. That points to hello, out on the heap. Then, when I said, okay, take what's in greeting and add to it, how are you? What really happened was that a second string was made, how are you? And then, through the power of concatenation, a third string was made that said, hello, how are you? So to be clear, what really happened, I'm going to hop over here to Notepad for just a second. Oh, no. There we go. Pop over to Notepad for just a second. And so what really happened was that I had this greeting variable, and it pointed to a string that said, hello. And then out in space, I created another string that said, how are you? And then through the power of concatenation, there was a third string that was formed called hello, how are you? And then when during the plus equals process, this value right here was simply reassigned so that it no longer pointed to hello. So what really is happening is that greeting is now pointing to the third new string, but the truth is, maybe I should show this to you on your screen. How about that? I typed all this stuff up. You didn't even get to see it. Sometimes I'm oblivious. I'm so sorry. Here we go. So let me show you one more time so I get this right. Originally, I had a greeting variable. Greeting pointing to hello. Then I created a second string called hello, how are you? And it was just out on the heap, right? Just out on the heap. And then through the power of concatenation, we built a third string. Hello, how are you? And then during the assignment, we greeting stopped pointed at hello and pointed at hello, how are you? So really what we're doing is we're building multiple strings and then we're telling the variable to point at a different one. So we're not really changing the string. We're changing which string we're pointing at. Strings are immutable. They can never be changed. Now, why do I want you to understand this and why do I want you to know that? Well, because in truth, behind the scenes, or I shouldn't say behind the scenes, but string comes with a bevy of methods. We kind of saw this the other day when we said, oh, okay, let's imagine for a moment that we get a string that has a bunch of white space at the beginning. Well, right now, if I leave that unmodified and I run the method, it comes up with a whole bunch of white space, and that's not very useful. However, if instead I call .trim on that string, it's going to remove all the white space at the beginning and at the end of that string. And if I do that, then I print that result, it looks like I have changed what greeting is pointing at. But that's not really the case, because strings cannot be changed. They can only be used to make other strings. So here on line 25, I print greeting.trim. On line 26, I simply print greeting. And what you'll see is that the original string was not actually changed, right? It still has all this white space. However, trim returns a string, and the string returned by trim, the new string returned by trim, is what was printed the first time. So if I want greeting to be trimmed permanently, what do I have to do? Well, I have to say that greeting is now going to point to the result of calling trim on greeting. And if I do that, and I don't even bother to print the trim anymore, you'll see that, in fact, actually, hang on a second. Before I do that, let me copy this line of code. And let me print greeting before I do the new assignment. And then let me print greeting after the new assignment. If I do that, you'll see that originally we have all this white space, but after I do the new assignment, the white space is gone. Remember, though, that what I've done is I've actually just created multiple strings, and I'm just changing where greeting is pointing. This is kind of an important concept because, you know, if we have a primitive, remember, strings are not primitive. If we have a primitive like int x, and I set that equal to 10, then in memory, x actually holds the value 10. This is inside the x bucket, right? But greeting does not hold a value. Greeting holds a reference. It holds a pointer that goes out to memory and finds another value. This is true of all non-primitive types in Java. They hold pointers or addresses to objects out in memory. So if I ever ask you, and this will come up, if I ever ask you, hey, x is a primitive, what's inside of x? Then what you should understand is that x holds the value literally. It holds the value 10. But if I have a reference type like a string, and I say, what's inside of greeting? You're going to be tempted to say inside of greeting is hello, how are you? But that's not the truth. Inside of greeting is the address, the pointer to the string out in memory of hello, how are you? If this doesn't make a lot of sense yet, that's okay. We're going to go over this in depth in class, and I'm not too worried about it. I just want you to see the principle here now, because what I'm trying to show you is that once a string is built, it can never be changed. But you can use it to build other strings, and then you can reference those other strings instead. That's what's really happening. If you understand the strings can never be changed from their original state, you can just go to new strings. Then methods like trim, right here, right? Methods like trim, or like, what else can we do? We can also do, let's see, gosh dang. We can do a substring. This actually reaches into an existing string and produces a new string made out of a subset of their characters. You can get, instead of, here's hello, how are you? Maybe I just want the word are. I can go to that exact position and pull just that word out of the string, and now that's my new string. Let's see, what else can I do? There's a concatenation method, but you can do that with the plus symbol, so I don't really care about that right now. You can ask, let's see, I want stuff that actually changes things. Index of returns an int. What else returns a string? See, sometimes I get confused with what you can do in C# versus what you can do. Oh, here we go. Replace. That's what I'm trying to say. Replace. Replace allows you to find every character of a certain type. Let's see. We have a couple E's. We have O's, right? Let's replace every O with I've got an idea, and I hope this works. Let's see, there are different versions. Can I replace this with a string? Will it let me do that, or will it have a problem? I don't think it'll let me do a string. No, it won't let me do a string. I was okay. So let's just replace it with the letter U. I like that. And or you know, we can go all elite and we can make it the number 0. Yeah, let's do that. Let's do it with the number 0. And now, when I print the greeting after this replace, you're gonna see how different it is. Let's go ahead and run it as is. Oh, come on. Oh, ha ha ha. I did exactly what I was worried about. This creates a new string. It doesn't change what greeting is. So I have to say greeting equals this thing. It's exactly what I was trying to show. All right, here we go. Now check it out. Here is greeting before it's trimmed and in its original state. Then I trim greeting and reassign it. And then I call replace on greeting and reassign it. And then the outcome is all the O's have been replaced with zeros. But just like I showed a moment ago, if I don't do the assignment, if I simply call replace, all that does is produce a string that doesn't get used. It just goes off into the ether and gets lost. And then the change is not propagated because greeting is still pointing at the original string, right? All right, cool. All right, bunch of demos, bunch of talking. No one else has any follow-up questions. You guys have had some really excellent conversations in the chat. That's awesome. I think this stream went way better than the first one, for obvious reasons. And again, Mr. Mercer, thank you so very much for being here, for moderating, and for setting up this server. This was way better in terms of addressing exact problems than the previous stream. But maybe there's some, undoubtedly, there are more things we could do to make this thing better. So if you have any suggestions on how we can make this better, please bring them with you to class, or feel free to add them to the chat here, because this Discord is, of course, a server that's live all the time, so you can add some suggestions here. That's great. Mr. Mercer, thank you for being here. Thank you very much. This is awesome. You did a great job, dude.
Thank you.
If no one else has any questions, I say we pull the plug. What do you think?
I think that might be good, because I know that at 12 we have the tabletop club meeting, like the first one for this quarter. So I think that people will probably be doing that.
Yeah, that makes me super happy.
Why?
Yeah, I don't know if you know that or not, but I'm a total RPG nerd. Don't know if you heard that earlier, but.
Oh no, I missed that part, but relatable.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys are awesome. Thank you very much for being here and for participating. As much as this is helpful to you, I will do this. If this is not helpful to you, or if we don't need it, I won't do this. Instead, I'll go play with my son who has muscles. All right, you guys are awesome. Thank you very much. Thanks for being epic and for never sucking. You guys take care.
Have a nice day.
Take care, Mr. Mercer.